Light spoilers for all series mentioned. I've always been one to champion light novels as a format. This is no secret. There's just something about a solid light novel that you cannot get from an anime or manga. Weird, I know, given that those two existed way before light novels were even a thing. So, I hope you understand then why the concept of what makes a light novel unique is constantly floating in the back of my head while I read them. Is it the characters, the setting, the writing style, the pacing? Is it just because the authors have a different set of influences compared to manga authors? The answer to all these can be yes, depending on the series. Light novel veteran Nisio Isin, for example, always drew inspiration from classical literature, but an isekai author is probably taking from the endless well that is the web novel space. Series like Ascendance of a Bookworm have stellar writing, characters, and world building, but the quick pacing of something like Eminence in Shadow or the loose framework of In Another World with My Smartphone can be just as appealing despite not being a textbook example of great writing. Then what do I think makes light novels unique? The main thread that links all these jarringly different series together. I mean, I know I have very taste, but it's not like I'm going out of my way to watch the Isekai Smartphone anime, yet I read 25 volumes of the light novel. Why? Why can I read something like Danmachi and herald it as one of the best light novels ever, despite kind of loathing its anime adaptation? And the same is true for a bunch of other series. Like, I'll read the light novel, but I just don't care to engage with their anime and manga adaptations. So clearly there's something about light novels themselves that is inherently appealing. What could that be? The answer is the format. The combination of the written format paired with the essence of anime, the soul, its no-holds-barred approach to tropes and storytelling leads to interesting ideas that aren't necessarily well-written, but that do tend to have a charming enough concept to keep the readers, well, reading. Take, for example, Gun Gale Online, which is basically just a battle royale esports commentary light novel with a cute anime girl as the lead. It never does anything crazy with that concept, but the battles, the action was so fun that I now have 11 volumes of it sitting on my bookshelf. While anime and manga are judged by metrics like good art style, voice acting, character design, and how well the story is set up, all within a couple episodes or chapters, a light novel is unique in that what you're holding, the volume you're holding, is technically a finished product, kinda. Like, yeah, web novels are released on a chapter-by-chapter basis, and J Novel Club does release all their light novels as individual parts before the actual volume releases, but the format of a light novel release is a whole volume, a whole book, typically about 200 pages plus long. This is by no means an unusual format in the book world, but it is an unusual format in the anime world, where long-running series that are updated weekly rule king. So this made me think, an extremely artistic question only I care about. How are light novels formatted? The answer, once more, is that they're formatted according to time. Now, I know that sounds like I'm waxing poetic, but hear me out, okay? Light novels are not like anime or manga. Anime get an episode a week in chunks called seasons, and manga can ostensibly run for decades if the foundation is there and it's what the author decided. Light novels are different because a volume is a volume, and that volume begins and ends of its own accord. Isn't that the same for manga volumes? Well, yeah, but you can go on MangaDex right after and read the latest chapter of whatever you want. Moreover, if you know anything about manga and you do happen to read it by volumes, like you happen to buy a lot of manga, you would know that a lot of manga volumes just end randomly. Like, it just ends like, oh, they counted 5 chapters, alright, here's where we're cutting it off. There's not as much attention paid to the concept of the whole volume, right? Alright, so then what about web novels? Aren't they the same thing? Nope. If you read the afterword of any light novel author ever, you would know that the light novel is almost always different from the web novel because the number of people that will buy something they can read for free is way lower. This means that you're getting chunks of a story every 3 months, sometimes even every year or 2 years if we're looking at certain veteran authors, looking at you, Overlord and Saga of Tiny the Evil. You might have never noticed because most of us start light novels when there's already a bunch of other volumes released. Like, if you're starting Sword Art Online now, you got 20 volumes to get through it, at the least, right? But the authors are writing them one at a time and releasing them every couple months. Even an insanely prolific writer like the author of Ascendance of a Bookworm released a volume basically every 3 months, and it still took her almost a decade to finish the series, meaning the readers would read a volume and come back 3 months later to read the next for a decade. So light novels themselves, the way they're structured, are formatted according to time. Take, for example, the easiest and most modern way to format a light novel, just like a manga. That is, formatting them with the intention of potentially writing the series forever. This means giving your characters an arbitrary goal they'll reach when the author gets tired of the series or the series gets axed. Typically, isekai and fantasy as a whole really is the genre that follows this format the most, with some exceptions I'll bring up later. It makes sense. Magic is the easiest way to fill up plot holes as you go and introduce as many allies, villains, powers, and prophecies as you want. If your protagonist beats the final boss, then we can just introduce another one. If your protagonist explores every country in this fantasy world, we can just add another continent. If your protagonist has too many waifus, well, polygamy is perfectly acceptable here, so just go ahead and do that. The best example I can give for this type of light novel format is In Another World with my smartphone. This light novel has 31 volumes out now. Let me tell you, the main story had been done and over with way before I stopped reading. But it doesn't matter because the appeal is in the idea, not the story. And also, this is not to discredit Isekai Smartphone because the author clearly wrote a world, a sandbox that makes people come back 31 consecutive times. I feel like that's the best way to put this type of light novel. A sandbox people want to come back to for like eternity, basically, right? Like, you want to engage with this world for as long as possible. So it doesn't matter if the protagonist never gets to their goal or if they keep going well after they get to it. You just want to keep coming back to these characters that feel so familiar. Basically, these light novels are operating on pure charisma. The author just has to make sure the readers love the world and characters enough to come back for the next volume. This format of light novel measures time as a hypnotic ebb and flow of likable characters kind of doing stuff for 200 pages or so. You blink and you're done with the volume, and you had a good time, and you'll be back in 3 months, and you won't think about when or how this is gonna end because you don't want to say goodbye to this world that is now so familiar to you. You hope that your time with this series is potentially forever. A format that goes hand in hand with this one and is perhaps interchangeable with it. Really, all these are interchangeable and usually work hand in hand, as you'll see later. But anyways, a format that goes hand in hand with this one is the episodic format. Trouble gets introduced at the start of the volume, all loose ends get tied up by the end of the volume. It works just as well as the previous format, if not better, because it's adjusted to the convenience of light novels. Hence why the format is more universally accepted by authors in all genres, not just isekai. As a matter of fact, the majority of series that were pioneers in the light novel space used this format, such as Boogie Pop, the Monogatari series, Kino's Journey, and early A Certain Magical Index, all of which are still ongoing, by the way. It makes perfect sense that this is the initial format for light novels because it was a relatively new ecosystem, and most authors kind of just wanted to test their weird anime-centric writing ideas they hadn't been able to pull off because the anime world required them to write a manga about those ideas if they wanted success. And so, when series like Boogie Pop succeeded, it made sense that the approach was, oh, shoot, that worked? Okay, let me come up with something for the next volume, I guess. It was a perfect format to launch out into the testing grounds that were the early light novel days. Oh, that story was a flop? You can always come back to the next volume to see if you enjoy that one, alright? None of us know how long we'll be here anyways. But don't let the archaic nature of the format fool you because it's still used pretty frequently today. The aforementioned Gun Girl Online employs this format and so does Infinite Dendrogram. Sabikui Bisco does as well. The Apothecary Diaries does it to an extent, at least when it comes to the mysteries of the volume. Funnily enough, the most successful one by far, Reincarnated as a Slime, implements both formats. It'll have a plot point to resolve completely by the end of the volume. No loose ends left unsolved, right? But it'll also have a bunch of loose ends in the grand scheme of things that are left there for volumes on end and that you don't particularly care about being resolved because you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of forgot about that thing from 6 volumes ago. This format measures time in short bursts. It's banking on you liking this individual story enough to check out the one from the next volume. It's assigning value not to the world as a whole, but to this particular moment it's presenting you with. This string of characters and plot points that come together to form a volume. It's hoping that you sit there with it for a bit and enjoy its presence for what it is. Even if you're not compelled to come back next time. Who knows? Maybe a couple months from now, you'll be curious enough to check out the story of this new volume. So those two are formats that I think form the main pillars most light novels have balanced on top of. But you'll notice that a lot of the prestige light novels you might care about aren't really included here, right? That's because those authors aren't measuring time solely through your enjoyment. They're hoping your time with them is so memorable, the series never leaves your mind. They're going for impact. The third format is arc structure. And this, like our first format, is loosely adjacent to anime and manga, insofar as the author has a story arc they want to write, and they're going to make sure they finish it regardless of how many volumes it takes. Take for example Torture Princess, where the very rules of the world or characters inhabit are rewritten every 3 volumes. The story concludes, and then a crazy plot twist gets introduced that unfolds into absolute emotional and physical chaos in bursts of 3 volumes at a time. Or say, Ascendance of a Bookworm, a series that is quite literally divided into 5 parts, all parts staunchly connected to a robust story thread that bobs and weaves through every aspect of that particular part. Is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? Goes for more of a a 2-volume arc, with one volume being the setup that introduces the conflict and leaves Bell in a dire situation, tests his character, tests his growth, and the second volume being the payoff, where we get to see Bell grow and progressively become more of a badass. Of course, Sword Art Online arcs are based off of the particular video game Kirito and friends happen to be playing, and Classroom of the Elite is divided into school years that occur 12 volumes at a time. And of course, there's the most popular one, Re:Zero, which is pretty much known by its epic sweeping arcs and not so much its individual volumes. The main difference between it and the two previously mentioned is that the story never adapts to the format, but the format will always take the shape that fits the story best. This format is taking advantage of the medium of light novels, of the written forms. It's banking on the abilities of the authors themselves, and their confidence that they can write an incomplete chunk of a story so well, you'll be coming back for more in a couple months. Like I said, their focus is not the time the light novel accompanies you or how long it runs for. No, their focus is in writing something so memorable you'll be thinking about those series far after they've concluded. So, as you can tell, that's the format I'm most passionate of, because a lot of the series I love do take part in it, but my respect, I still love a lot of series from the other formats. But anyways, enough of the passionate rants. You might have noticed that I haven't brought up any romance series. Why do you think that is? Well, it's because of the final format of the day, the thing romance is most notorious for, funnily enough. That is, light novels that have to end. Now, obviously, light novels have to end at some point, but hear me out, right? This is similar to the arc structure, and they can, again, be interchangeable, but different in that the arc format can go on for a while, too, you know? Like, sure, there's set arcs, but nothing is stopping the authors from making those arcs long as hell, like Bookworm and Re:Zero. And yeah, I know most series probably have set endings in the author's heads, like, they already know how the series will end, but that's not what I mean. Set ending light novels are light novels that are going to absolutely end, usually in under 20 volumes. Hence, why the majority of romance light novels fall under this category. This is probably the format in which the genres actually differ from their manga counterparts the most. There's romance manga that have been ongoing for years, if not decades now, but romance light novels end around 15 volumes or less. Why is that? Well, because there's a lot of space to fill in a light novel volume, so you kind of run out of excuses for why the couple still isn't together pretty quickly. No, but seriously, set ending light novels are probably the most humble of the bunch, because the authors will write the story only as long as it needs to be, and then they'll dip. By that, I don't mean that the light novel didn't sell, so they stopped. No, I mean that they literally set up a system where the act of writing a volume will inevitably lead them closer to the end of the story. I'm in Love with the Villainess is a perfect example of this. The story is 5 volumes long, but the main story is told to us at the start and pretty much concludes in 3 volumes. Reign of the Seven Spellblades, the protagonist has a set number of things he has to achieve, so we know it won't go on forever. Classroom of the Elite, I don't think we're gonna see a Yanokoji flunk a year, so we know year 3 will be its last. The Saga of Tanya the Evil, war can't go on forever, and we know there's no winners in war. These series are not measuring time, they're a timer that's ticking down. The more volumes you read, the closer you are to their end, and the more you appreciate the series as a whole as the number of this volume goes up. Well, I think that's all of the ones I had. Of course, they're all interchangeable, like I said, and really, a lot of the authors will switch up their formats as they go along. It's not like they stick to a single format forever, especially if their series goes on for a while. Like, plug and play, oh, this format no longer works for this story, so I gotta switch it to this one. Like I said, these can definitely exist in a single series all at once, and no genre is limited to one format or the other, right? It's perfectly possible for a romance to go on forever. Like, if you tag something else on top of it, like in Data Life. Data Life does that, and so does High School DxD. They're technically romances, but because there's something else on top, they go on for a while. But usually, one of these formats tends to dominate the series as a whole. Leave your favorite light novel format in the comments, or if you think there's one I missed, feel free to tell me by all means. I'm not the light novel scholar or professor I don't claim to be. I miss plenty of things, and I'm always happy when someone adds something of their own to these ideas I spontaneously write down. I don't spend weeks researching this. This is just quick, spontaneous ideas I get. I do think every author has their unique writing style, so it's honestly impossible to pin down the exact format some of them use. Anyways, that's it. Bye. Why was that so sassy? Anyways, later, guys. Oh, and please like the video. Maybe.